we end every episode with what we call the Let's Get Practical, which is a segment where, okay, so if a listener wants to start doing something, right? How do I do? So we don't just listen and learn, we're actually benefiting by doing. Chris, what are 2 or 3 suggestions you would have for what a CEO, a founder, a senior leader can do immediately to start addressing some of what we talked about today or capitalizing on what we talked about today?
Yeah. So the first thing that a piece of advice that I would give is to get involved. Yep. Oftentimes owners and CEOs don't want to get involved in health insurance. It's vitally important that you do. Now, not necessarily that you have to run the process or be involved from beginning to end, right? We understand that you've probably got a team of people who are responsible for doing this, but getting involved, and I would say there's really 2 points that you have to get involved in this. It's at the very beginning. So the way a process of working with an advisor should work is there's going to be kind of a due diligence process where you're understanding the goals and the vision of what the company's trying to accomplish with their plan. And the CEO being in that room is going to help set the guardrails of what that vision needs to look like and set the rules of the road. This is what we're going after. This is what we're trying to obtain. I think it's just vitally important that they get involved very early on. Often the HR leadership and CFO are the ones that are going to manage the health insurance piece. But having that CEO help set the vision of where they're going, HR leaders are unbelievably important. They're so valuable to our organizations. But when you think about their skill set, they're probably most, but not all. I've worked with some HR leaders that have a very deep background in finance, but for the most part, they don't have the requisite finance skills and understanding the different types of transactions. And so what often happens, unfortunately, is what might be the best solution for an employer to meet their goals and in line with their vision gets removed from the board before it ends up going to a CFO or a CEO for final approval. And so being able to get involved in the very beginning in that goal setting and strategy session, allowing your team to run the process with your advisor. But the second most important place for that CEO to get involved is at the very end when the presentation is being made of this is the strategy. I'm not necessarily talking about this is the renewal option that you have and looking at the numbers on a spreadsheet. It's this is what I understood your goals and your vision to be, the problems that you're trying to solve. This is how you solve those particular problems. And that allows that CEO to see that vision and be able to communicate with their executive leadership team, whether this is in line or not and something that we should evaluate. I almost think that sometimes the team that's responsible for the day-to-day running of a health benefit plan, there's a fear that that they don't want to break something. They don't want to cause disruption. And having that CEO in there, having their buy-in can change everything. And that's where we have the most success, is getting a CEO to sit in that room and to contribute to that meeting, not necessarily involved in the day-to-day and the back and forth that's involved in that process of setting the strategy, but at the beginning and the end. I think that's the most important piece of advice that I would give to a CEO.
All right, I'll add a couple that I took from our conversation. One, we led with right off the bat that actually now is a good time to be getting involved, even though renewal might be over. If you're one of those companies that renews at the end of the year or renews on January 1, now is still a good time. While to your point, Chris, the data is current and the process of renewal is fresh in your mind. Right? So don't put this off for 12 months where you're going to have, or 9 months. Now it's still a great time. I liked when you were talking about just, I think, remembering the dynamic of the broker and the business, right? That you as the business owner, remember that your broker or your advisor works for you, and ask questions, and you have more, in your words, Chris, you have more influence than you realize. And then I think maybe the last thing, again, we touched on a little bit earlier, is maybe that's the challenge. If you really want something, if you want it to be different, then think about benefits management like you think about strategic or business management, right? You're constantly thinking 3 to 5 years out, and yet I know very few business owners who think about their benefits from maybe as a line item on their P&L or a standard, it's going to rise 10, 15%, but think about the management of it and be more strategic in managing this. It is a massive cost. and it probably deserves a level of focus and attention that running the rest of your business deserves as well.
Yeah, one closing point I would make, it is important to challenge our assumptions. We've been told this is the way that it is, and there's not much that we can do about it. And so many big problems have been solved in our society, and new businesses have been created because we challenged the possibility of what could be. We challenge our own assumptions. If you've ever seen an elephant at the circus, big elephant, it's tied down with this little stake in the ground, and you think to yourself, there's no way that stake is going to hold that elephant. But the elephant doesn't challenge the stake. Why? Because when that elephant was a baby, they were tied to that same stake and they weren't strong enough to pull it out of the ground. And so they've gone their entire life learning, I can't pull this stake. Well, don't challenge it anymore. And we've got to stop doing that, because there are opportunities in the market that are easy for employers to grab if they're just willing to challenge the status quo, challenge what they've been told, and ask the two questions. Why? Why is this happening? And what can I do? Or why not? Why is this not available to me? If you ask those two things and you challenge that, you're going to find something there.
All right. I'm excited to dig into episode 2. But before we leave this episode, Chris, you mentioned earlier like a checklist that a business owner can go through, a mind map to choose a broker. Where can they find that? And where can they learn more about you, Chris Hamilton?
Yeah. So I have a website, fixhealthinsurance.com. I've got 2 items that I give away to anybody that's interested in them. One is a playbook. I call it the Benefits Insider Playbook. So I created the Benefits Insider as an insider to the industry. These are the things that we do with our own health insurance plan. We expose the secrets that the insurance companies don't want you to know. And here's a conceptual strategy that you should be using as you're going through your strategy setting and planning. The second piece is that broker checklist. So if you're looking to hire a new advisor or new broker, these are the questions that you should be asking them. And I give some feedback on answers that you should be looking for based on what your goals are. So some brokers or some companies have a goal of lowering their health insurance costs and improving their benefits, or maybe they've got service-related issues and they want to solve for that. Depending on what you need in your company, I have questions and answers you should be looking for to make sure that you're bringing in the right person.
If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, perhaps we can post links directly to that download. Same thing, if you're viewing us through LinkedIn, which is where if you're not following us on LinkedIn, you should be. Go out and do a search for the Lions Group or the Frustrated CEO podcast, and you'll find us. And we can post links there as well. I know that this is valuable content for our listeners. And as I led with, I know these are issues that really keep our CEO listeners awake at night. Chris, thank you so much for helping us with even just part 1. And thanks in advance for agreeing to come back for another episode in a little bit.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, listener, thank you for sticking with us to the end of another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. Big shout out to my colleagues who are not here, but will rejoin us again in the future. And we'll see you again next time on the Frustrated CEO podcast.